Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. For those of you who are new to my channel, thank you for coming here. We hope that you could be a part of our building and growing community. And you could do that by hitting that subscribe button, liking the video, sharing it, and this will help, to grow our community here. But let's get right to it. Today, I got a special guest for you. It is none other than my dear friend, colleague, and mentor, George Mumford, who was, one of the, mindfulness coaches to Kobe Bryant, the late Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, and many more. And he was coined the secret weapon of Phil Jackson, who won several championships with the Chicago Bulls and the Los Angeles Lakers. George is a mindfulness expert. He helps people to really activate their full potential. And so George is a man filled with wisdom in every way, shape, and form. And he's going to share his personal story as well as his droplets of wisdom, mindfulness, and ways that we could generate the hope past some of the pain. So without further ado, welcome my dear friend and mentor, George Mumford. George Mumford, my dear friend, my brother from another mother, I couldn't thank you enough for coming here on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. It's an honor to see your face and to have you here.
Yeah, well, it's always great to see you, Jake, and to be here. And Jacob's Ladder, wow, that's quite a name.
Yeah. Well, they say your name reveals your potential, and that's what I try to do. I try to live up to that name.
All right.
But,
Okay.
Your name was brought to my doors in a small town, Long Island, when I was least expecting it. In comes this handsome man, and I didn't, know who you were. I know you were dating one of my grandparents' daughters and grandparents' friend's daughter, and then you came into my home, and the relationship started there. But you echoed the name of Black Jesus, aka Michael Jordan, and Kobe Bryant, and I said, a man who knows these individuals in a small town, in my house of Long Island. Like, am I tripping? What's going on? But you've had quite an impact on the world and so many high prolific athletes, and I admire you as a friend, but also a student of yours, like so many. But I see you as a phoenix out of the ashes from your life's trajectory. Could you just maybe tell some of my viewers how you started to find this practice of mindfulness, more so on a personal level, because a lot of people know you as working as, as a coach with some of the most high prolific athletes and people in our world. But beyond that, it started from a different trajectory on a personal level. So maybe tell us a little bit about your background.
Yes. So it's interesting. It's coming up. We've had Hanukkah and Christmas, Kwanzaa, all of the holidays coming together, and those were the good times was early on in Camelot, if you will, really around the same time JFK was in office, and he's a homeboy. He's from Brookline. He was born in Brookline, and so in Massachusetts and whatnot. But I grew up one of 13, and so it was challenging growing up with 8 sisters and 4 brothers and whatnot. But I found sports. I was always a little precocious. I could feel people's feelings, and I was an empath, and so I could feel people's pain, and I was more. I would more lock into pain than I would lock into somebody's joy or happiness. And so I was told as a young man, stop being so sensitive and whatnot. And so I kind of shut down a little bit around that. But I played sports, and fast forwarding to UMass Amherst, I went to UMass Amherst to play basketball. I played basketball in high school and in junior high school, and I was up and coming basketball player. But when I went to UMass, I was a walk on. I wasn't a I had an academic scholarship, not an athletic scholarship. But anyway, make a long story short, we were playing pickup in my sophomore year. That means it was what we call OTA, was an organized team activity, and I was playing with the varsity and a couple other people that were going out for the team, and I got my lace cut from underneath me, and I hurt my, I really chipped some bones and whatnot. And that was pretty much my career as a basketball player in college. So I didn't get to play, and I got addicted to pain meds and then illegal drugs and alcohol, and I was a very functional substance abuser. I continued to work and whatnot, and at some point, you lose a lot. I lost my car, I lost a lot of respect, all of that stuff. But what happened was on April Fool's Day on 1984, a friend of mine came by my house, and he was clean and sober. I didn't think that was an option for me,
Mm-hmm.
and he took me to an AA meeting, and then I went to AA, and I continued to dabble a little bit, but I went into detox in that July, and when I came out, um, I was, I was clean and sober. Um, and just talk about the mystery a little bit. Something changed when I went to those meetings and I saw other people getting clean, and we talk about a higher power connecting to a high level of consciousness. But I do know when I was going into the detox, I heard a voice say to me, if the same George comes out that goes in, we got a problem.
All right.
So I started getting in touch with my intuition. I always had it, but I think I was getting
Mm-hmm.
back in touch with it. But anyway, when I got out, I discovered I had chronic pain, and just dealing with chronic pain and recovery from substance abuse. I got I was in therapy. I was seeing somebody, and the therapist helped me get into a 21-day detox and all of that stuff that goes with it. But the bottom line was that I had to figure out how to deal with the pain without relying on pain meds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would use them, but definitely it was a concern. And so I was in a HMO back in those days. It was Harvard Vanguard Medical Associates or Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. It was a whole system that was set up. So it was an HMO, and they had this cutting edge research study going on uh, with a woman by the name of Joan Borisenko. And at that
Mm-hmm.
time, she was one of three psychoneuroimmunologists. And so she taught me about lifestyle change. She taught me how to taught me about psychology and philosophy, and the mind body modalities like yoga and tai chi, and teach me how to meditate and about mindfulness. I don't know if we called it mindfulness in those days. Back then, I remember people talking about that Zen stuff. Zen was a catchword in those days. But anyway, so I learned how to manage, to self-regulate, the realizing that I can control my some of my vitals that were involuntary. You can control them, not directly, but indirectly. So I learned about the mind body, and learned about how to learn about and take responsibility. That's the main thing, take responsibility for my life. So I took responsibility, and not only did it help me deal with my chronic pain and help me in my recovery, but I felt it was a great way to live, and it really allowed me to start to unlock and really get more access to the greatness within, you might say.
Mm-hmm.
And I continued to work. I was a financial analyst, so I continued to work for a couple of years. But then I went back to graduate school and got my counseling psychology degree, and
Wow.
things just kept happening, kept happening. So when I ended up leaving the corporate world, and I ended up at some point um, connected with John Kabat-Zinn because we had a mutual friend, and so I started working at the Center for Mindfulness. Back in those days, it was a stress reduction and relaxation
Mm-hmm.
program, but people know it as MBSR, mindfulness based stress reduction. So I did some of that, but at the same time, I lived in a meditation center for 6 years. And during that time, I got to go out and work with uh, people from all walks of life. It could be a youth center, it could be it could be a business, it could be a community. And I ended up doing work in prisons and whatnot. But I really, what do I want to say? Once I got into it, And then when I was working at the medical center, I worked there for 5 years, and I was the prison project director. So we had over 6,000 inmates go through our program, as well as the commissioner and a lot of his staff. I used to do twice a year. I used to do staff training, just working with different folks. Um, and um, and what happened, and 30 years ago, as a matter of fact, 30 years ago in October, um, uh, was that summer. John was teaching mindfulness-based stress reduction. He was doing it with clinicians like yourself
Mm.
and social workers and whatnot. And at that same time, Phil Jackson, this is in a place called Omega in Rhinebeck, New York.
Yeah.
And at the same time, Phil was doing this program called, what was it called? Uh, Beyond Basketball. So when he played for the New York Knicks, he had a teammate, Eddie Mass, that had a heart attack and died. And so he did this thing in the summer. It was like a fantasy camp,
Mm.
and people would come there and pay, and he would take them through the rigors of like a training camp, and then they would play games and whatnot, play basketball games and whatnot. And so when he was interacting, well, he knew John, and he and his wife at the time, June, uh, was a social worker, and she was taking the course, and she talked to she mentioned to John that Phil was interested in bringing somebody in to work with the Bulls. They had just won their three championships, 91, 92, 93. And the real question was, he wanted to help the guys deal with the stress of success. People don't realize that success, there's stress that comes with success. As a matter of fact, I would say that I have a quote here that one side is potential freedom, which is heads, and the tails is anxiety, uncertainty. They come together.
Mm.
And so I was going to help the guys deal with the stress of success. So Phil and I talked, and then that October during training camp, I would come in and work with the team. Well, in the interim, Michael Jordan's father got murdered,
Mm.
and Michael retired. And so we were in full blown crisis. And so that's how I got in to start working with elite athletes. And then, of course, rest 30 years later, the rest is history. But when I was working at the medical center, I was just going in to help his players deal with the stress of success. But we were in full blown crisis. So all of my training came to bear. And plus, I was ideal for the job because one of the things that happened when I was at UMass, I was Dr. J's roommate.
Mm.
And we used to play basketball together. And so when he went to the pros, I used to go to games, in Virginia and whatnot. And so uh, um, I was well suited to work with the likes of Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman and those folks. So that's how it got started. And then, of course, the Bulls uh, went on to win 3 more championships. And then Phil, when he left the Bulls, he took a year off. And then when he went to the Lakers, he brought me along. And so we continued to run. And so 96, 97, 98, we won NBA championships. And then 99, we didn't. And I think the Spurs won. And then 2000, 2001, 2002, we won 3 more championships. So in that 7-year period, we won 6 NBA championships. And
Mm.
so I didn't realize that until I looked at it years later, because you're always in the moment. So you can celebrate for maybe 2 weeks.
Mm.
Yeah, get back to work. You know?
Right.
And so that was it. And of course, the rest is history.
Mm.
The Lakers won 2 more, and so we won the first 3 of the decade and the last 2 of the decade. So we
Yeah.
won 5 championships in that 10 from 2000 to 2010 um, with the Lakers. So I've been involved in 8 NBA championships and worked with elite performers, people in business. I've worked with soccer players, field hockey players. Currently, I'm working with the NHL team, but I've worked with the football team, worked with the New York Knicks for a couple of seasons. Uh, and yeah, so I'm just excited to be able to be here and talk with you. But and we talk a lot, that it was the adversity that actually got me on of my path to self-discovery, to actually realizing that the only person I could be is me, and that my job was to embrace my greatness, as I say in my book, Unlock. Embrace the greatness, find the flow, discover success. So
Mm.
it's an inside job.
George, I've known you for quite some time, but just hearing that and sitting back, if you were to script that in a movie, I wouldn't believe it. A man
Right.
that grew
Right.
up one of 13. When people think of Boston, they think of Fenway Park or the Garden. They don't recognize that there's parts of Boston that are rough, and you grew up in some of
Yes.
those areas. Do you ever, when you were sitting by the Lakers bench or by the Bulls, did you ever just like pinch yourself like, my God, I'm working with Michael Jordan and Kobe, and I grew up, in these difficult circumstances, and I had addiction. I mean, did you ever just, sit back and understand the magnitude of it? And also, what do you feel was allowing this incredible transformation that you've had throughout the course of your life? Do you contribute it to a higher power? Do you contribute it to mindfulness? What was that factor that allowed you? Because most people
Yeah.
grow up in those communities, don't end up out of it. And bear in mind, working with MJ or Kobe, or you can't make this up. This is incredible.
Yeah. It's all about the spirit.
Mm,
Edgar Casey, the sleeping prophet, said the spirit is the life, mind is the builder, and the physical is the result.
mm,
And so it's a spiritual, we're spirit, E equals MC squared, we're energy.
mm,
And I attribute it to connecting to higher consciousness, higher power. But it flows through me. It's not out here, some other place, some other time. It is here right now in this moment. So uh, it's interesting because people will say to me, well, you've done so many amazing things. And part of me is like, you're trying to give me credit for being myself. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I won't take credit for being myself, but I'll take credit for getting out of the way and let the spirit flow through me.
mm,
Let the
mm,
love flow through me. I'll take credit for that, the being willing
mm,
to embrace my greatness, find the flow, discover success, to unlock, if you will. And if you're not permanently unlocked, but to unlock under certain circumstances. But it's interesting because I was so busy in the moment. As a matter of fact, one of the things I did, Jake, was when I was working with the Bulls and that first two seasons, we did okay, but we didn't win championships. But I had this, I visualized myself being behind the bench when the team won a championship.
wow.
So it's the opposite. I had the vision of it, something, and it wasn't something I thought, well, that would be cool. It just came to me. You
Mm,
know what I'm saying? It's like that still small voice is easily drowned out. It just started speaking and say, hey, it would be cool, to be behind the bench and have your team win
wow.
the NBA championship. So that happened 8 times.
So you had a little bit of Joe Namath theater. You saw it all before anyone, right?
Well, I didn't know what team it was going to be. I just said it would be cool.
Yeah, yeah.
And so three of those teams were Bulls, and the other five were Lakers. So, but the thing is, and I've had other dreams. I mean, I remember thinking about a car and doing that. So I started getting in touch with that, but it was too scary to continue to deal in that stuff. So it was years later that I think about it and realize, oh, that did happen. But you're right. When I think and reflect on it, it's unreal. But at the same time, uh, this is why I'm here. I'm being who I'm supposed to be, and stuff happens. And some of it, you see the good stuff, you don't see the challenging stuff, but it's all
Mm,
together. And it's like, yeah, you're right. It's unbelievable, but this is Christmas, and so I usually I watch It's a Wonderful Life at least uh, uh, 10 times. I don't know how many times it's on, and
right.
Ebenezer Scrooge and all of that. But there's something about It's a Wonderful Life. Even when I was struggling, it was still a wonderful life. It's just that I couldn't see it, and I was vibrating at a too low a level, if that
Mm,
makes any sense, to really appreciate it. But when I think about it now and I appreciate it, there's a part of me that says, yes, this is amazing. It's amazing and it's unbelievable. But at the same time, if I may go back into my old thing with higher power, with God, all things are possible.
mm,
So so to me it's like yeah, we all have this masterpiece within, and when we embrace it, as things happen, the universe will collude with us. It's something about taking personal responsibility and saying, I'm going to do this, that it happens. But it's not the small I or the small S, it's the big S. It's the self that know that I and the other are one.
Mm.
That knows that I'm not a separate. That's the illusion of separateness keeps us in. But once we get beyond that, every once in a while, we realize that, yeah, I and the other are one. And the most recent occurrence of that was last year when the football player ended up getting his,
Damar Hamlin, yeah, on the Bills, yeah.
yeah, and when he fell back, everything stopped. Everybody was no longer the Bills, and I forget who they were playing,
The
whoever they were,
Bills and the Bengals in
and the Bengals.
Cincinnati,
Yeah,
yeah.
in Cincinnati. It didn't matter, and the NHL was never canceled the game
Mm.
and whatnot, but there was something that just happened, and even though it was a devastating thing, but it's curious how sometimes we get devastation gets our attention.
Mm. But
Even though,
wasn't it so beautiful to see that life, sports is a part of life, but life is in many ways bigger than a game, and to see the empathy, the compassion, the unity that both teams had, and just reminds me how you may play one team against another, but we're all on the same team at the end of the day. It was beautiful
yeah,
in that
all you got
regard.
to do is ask Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan what it's like to have a guy on your team that gave you facial scars that used to beat you up for 2, 3 years, 4 years. And all of a sudden, he's your teammate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You talk about Rodman, right?
I'm
Yeah,
talking about Rodman.
and the Bad Boys.
Yeah, and that's when you don't take it personally, and they said he's a teammate, and so now we have a different relationship.
Yeah. Oh, they forget Zeke was the one. He's the angel and the devil. He had the angelic voice, but he was the one who was calling the shots. They say, but I love Zeke, a fellow Taurus, a great man to this day. My question for you is, both of your books I loved, and I can't pick one over the other. It's like asking Michael or they're both unique. But your first book, just by the title itself, The Mindful Athlete, that particular title, to some, that might feel like a contradiction because when you think of an athlete, what do you think of? You think of doing. Mindfulness, you think of being. So, how did you sell this to some of the biggest alpha athletes from Shaq to Kobe to MJ? It just seems like a very contrasting energy field to be about Zen practice and Bruce Lee stuff and Jedi mind tricks. These guys are wired to just focus on going forward and, toxic masculinity. And I don't have how did you do? That's remarkable how you and Phil broke into that. I'm amazed by that.
Yeah, well, it's called flow.
Not the progressive girl, but flow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
flow.
Yeah.
It's like when you are performing at your best. And Joseph Campbell talks about a little bit in The Power of Myth when he says when the athletes in championship form, they're coming. There's a quiet place. There's a place of rest inside. That when you're coming out of that, you're not compelled by fear or desire.
Hmm.
You're just compelled on just performing. And so when you get in the flow, one of the characteristics of being in flow is there's no self-consciousness. You're not there as an I.
Hmm. Wow.
You're just blending with things as they are. And so yeah, so it's a spiritual happening. It's this idea you get beyond yourself. And this is what I think we love about sports, because what happens in sports is we see people going beyond what we perceive as being the norm.
Hmm.
We're breaking barriers. And this thing about the ego is being a barrier. And so when you are in flow, you forget who you are and you're just being. And so people don't realize that you got to be before you can have, before you can do. So being is just a part of being. It's like you say, okay, being then doing. Well, anything you do has to come out of being.
Hmm.
So, but we get so focused on the doing, just focused on the outside, we don't realize that what's out here is a reflection of what's in here.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you feel me? You get what I'm saying? So it's not a contradiction. It's just that our perception is in the realm of good and bad, right and wrong, left and right. instead of being in the realm of unity, or in, like, if you want to talk about a hologram, you can take a part of the hologram, but the whole is in that little piece. So, and we keep thinking that we're these fixed points. And my experience is, and this is what I read from, I forget who said it, but we are not fixed points. We are ever changing events.
Wow. Continuing unfolding. We're not in that.
You
It's
never
really,
arrive.
yeah.
You're just always in the becoming, the being. And so that's the thing, because that's the first law that the Buddha talks about, is impermanence. Things are constantly changing. They're in flux. Even the Greeks talked about things being in constant flux. So they're being in constant flux. Things are changing. And so the idea is, can you ride the wave of change rather than get hit with the wave of change? That's what I just say to people. So we're changing all the time. That's why we're not fixed points. We're ever changing events. But our values, our core values, our principles, the things about principles are, if you take the principle of love, freedom, whatever, there's three things about a principle. One is it is universal, it's timeless, and it's self-evident. And so when you align yourself with the way the universe works, like you align yourself with gravity, you're probably going to be okay. But if you say you don't believe in gravity, well, that's not going to stop you from falling. And you got to make an effort to get off. And then when you really think about it, here we are in this globe that's going around these heavenly objects, yet we're not falling. What's up with that? That's gravity. You see what I'm saying? So there's a lot that we don't know. We thought the world was flat, but it's not, because we couldn't foresee that if it wasn't flat, then how would we stay connected to the earth? Why, when we roll off, and that sort of thing. So there's a lot we don't know. But as you know, Jake, I'm talking about Jacob's Ladder, there's the seen and the unseen. And the unseen is not something you can approach linearly. It's not linear. There's linear and there's nonlinear. There's Newtonian physics, then there's quantum physics. And the consciousness has an impact on all of this stuff. So I know it sounds kind of weird to people, but the reality is, when you're in a positive mind state, like I talk about the Hall of Fame, you know how you get to the Hall of Fame? HOF, hope, optimism, faith.
I love that. Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Because then they call it the Brighton and Bill theory. When you're at positive, now I have this panoramic vision. It's like I'm open to everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever. But when that panoramic vision, when you're in that vision, you have access to wisdom and creativity. And that's that place that Joseph Campbell talked about. I call it the eye of the hurricane, or that masterpiece, or that silence within. That when you're in that space, when you're not compelled by fear, desire, or any other emotions, you're just there, and you're doing the thing you're doing for no reason, for the activity of being in the moment and expressing yourself honestly and fully, for no reason other than to be who you are, and to be able to do what you want to do, you got to be a certain way. So the being comes first, and so that's what gets in the way. So when we start talking about it, we start separating things and interpreting things in ways that are logical, but that only covers part of the pie. The other part of the pie is nonlinear, and it takes both. So you have to be comfortable knowing that we don't know a lot, but we can tell things. So if I were to say to you, Jake, explain to me how you learn how to ride a bike, that's nonlinear. And it's non-declarative. It's implicit. You know it, but you can't describe how you know it. But you know it, and you don't forget it. So there's a part of the universe, what we call the metaphysical. You talk about this a lot. That we don't understand, but we experience, and it has an impact on our behavior.
I love every droplet and word you just said. And, it reminds me that sometimes we look at ourselves with this box, and this box is who we are, and it's all we see. And a lot of people don't want to change that box, and that's okay. But we get fixed. And you just made that the analogy to the planet that we're on, how people once saw it as a way, and without challenging that box, it would not be. And so your work I view as very groundbreaking because for now, you look at the change in trajectory of athletes and you see people like Kevin Love and others taking ownership of mental health as it being real. And people are able to understand that times change and we could expand how we see ourselves, the nature of reality. And my hope is people could see athletes that are practicing this inner stuff and start to see that, hey, if they're doing it, then we all can. It's not just for hippies out there in Woodstock or whatever. This is something that everyone can do if you want to achieve a goal, but more importantly, if you want to really tap into that masterpiece within, as you always speak about. But how do some people really find this greatness within? Because is it for a select few, or do you feel we all have that ability? Why are some people seemingly far away from finding this piece and others seem to tap into it?
The alarming possibility of being able. That's what Kierkegaard calls it. He says possibility and anxiety are two sides of a coin.
Mm.
And so the challenge is, and I was just watching something on YouTube, young guys that I work with at Overtime and Lead, they spend a lot of time watching YouTube. They be watching, different players, could be MJ, could be anybody. They watch things. So I go on YouTube and I watch these masters that, and I get to hear, because I got Audible, and I have their books, but to hear the teachings and the person who created them's own words, Viktor Frankl, and he reminded me, this self-transcendence, or this idea of this, a lot of his psychology, or a lot of schools of psychology, they talk about homeostasis, or just being, when you're doing things, you're calm and whatever. And Viktor Frankl is reminding us that no struggle, no swag. Here's where you are. This is where you're going. And there's tension there. You can call it stress. You can call it whatever you want. But there's tension. That tension has to be endured. It has to be worked through. And the interesting thing is, the kids do this all the time. The little kids who learn how to walk. They're the possibilities in front of them. But the difference is they got this sense of wonder. They have this joy of discovery. And they don't have a sense of self that's telling them, or you should or should not be able to do it. They're just going to do it. So when we can live in the joy of discovery, when we can just live in this idea of the only way out is always through, and that you got to endure that tension, and you can do it with joy, you can do it with ease, but it doesn't mean you don't feel uncomfortable. I talk about this in my Mind for Athlete book. You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because if you're not getting comfortable, you're not expanding your capacity. You're in a box. Like I like to say is that you can be in a sarcophagus or a coffin, and it's pretty safe in there, but you're stiff. There's no life there. You're stuck. But to be life, and you open up and you embrace it, it's going to be like, if I take this fist and I hold it like this for a long time, when I open it up, it's going to hurt. That's just a process. It's nothing personal.
Right.
So you get comfortable being uncomfortable. But Soren Kierkegaard talked about this in 1846. He talked about this possibility comes with anxiety, uncertainty, but you embrace it. And when you embrace it and you move through it, you get stronger. That's how you get strong unshakable self-belief. And this is what I had to learn from my own experience going through this quagmire of chronic pain and addiction. And I learned in that clinic, I learned the 3 C's. You see things as challenges, your commitment to your growth, and you can control whether you react or respond to something. Something happens, and then you either react or respond. So we make choices, even when we don't. We have this self-awareness that allows us to notice things, and then we can start to see if we can learn how to train ourselves so we can slow down the perceptual process so that we create space. And when we're able to notice things, I call it notice, relax, let go. When you can notice things and you're just watching it with curiosity, like a little kid, like, what is this? How is this working? And you notice that at some point there's there's a stimulus, and then we either react, which is no space between
mm,
stimulus and response, and it's automatic pilot reacting, habits out of habit. And then there's times when we create space, when we don't
mm,
look at things and try to interpret it, because what happens is the process of perception is really quick, and there's
mm,
only a minute second where it's raw data
mm,
before it gets infused with self-interest, associative thinking, abstract thinking, and embellishment. Oh, I remember this. And you're relating to things based
mm,
on what you already know, rather than being vulnerable and letting what's there speak to you in its own language.
mm,
And so you create that, and you actually slow down. Like as an athlete, that you hear them where they play well when they able to slow down their
mm,
mind and just be able to be with things as they are. And there's something about being in that eye of the hurricane, or being in that place of rest Joseph Campbell talked about, when you're just there and you're just noticing. Then at some point when you figure out things, then you're not only just seeing things, but the seeing and the rising and the being are co-rising at the same time. So that you just see things and you just know. I'll give you
mm,
an example. You see it sometimes when somebody's playing sports. Well, sports are helpful. Why? Because they have a beginning, middle, and an end, and you
mm,
can observe it. And we can observe it in ways where we're willing to be vulnerable sometimes, unless it's the other, not your team. You don't want to see your team lose, but you'll see it sometimes when you're in this silence
mm.
and you're just watching and you're playing like you're playing shortstop or one of the bases. And when the ball is hit, when you're coming out of that silence, your body's moving where the ball is going to be.
Mm. It's a natural
It's
flow.
a
Yeah.
natural flow because you train yourself, but then you got to be able to just let go and just be and
Mm,
just allow things to unfold. And when they unfold and when you really see them, the clarity of seeing and the being, you know
mm,
exactly what to do. And we
mm.
do this when we have conversations and stuff. How many times you're sitting there and you're thinking about somebody? Oh, I'm thinking of George, and all of a sudden George calls me.
That has happened. Or text.
What's up with that? Or the opposite what happened. I'm thinking you, and I get a text from you. You see
We're
what I'm
all
saying?
connected. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we're all in the World Wide Web, if you will,
Yeah.
or they call it the Akashic Records. They got different names for it, database of
Mm,
consciousness. But everything that ever was or will be already exists.
mm. I love it. And it's so true, the interconnected and how the microcosm is connected to the macrocosm. And sometimes we forget that the two relate itself. But you have a saying that I love, and you've lived this. This is an allegory of your life, that in order to find yourself, you must be willing to lose yourself. And
Yeah.
that certainly was a part of your trajectory. But when I observe what you're saying, it almost seems like a lot of us, when we grow up, we're taught to defeat that child, to run away from that child, to
Mhm.
become an adult. And it seems like when we're kids, that's when we're really connected to flow. And then
Yes.
we
Yes.
fall in love with regurgitation over imagination, and that's when we get messed over. So it seems from what you're saying, be more into your inner child, be more connected, be more playful, be curious, you
Be
know?
be childlike, not childish, but have that
Right. It
sense
is,
of wonder.
not immature or whatever,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah.
Because one of the flow triggers is unpredictability,
Mm, mm,
complexity, unpredictability. There's certain things, newness, novelty.
mm,
So just think about this, Jake. Just think about this for a minute.
mm,
If you see things in new and fresh ways,
mm,
and you're willing to spend what you know and to let whatever's happening speak to you in its own language,
mm,
you are in the high state of arousal. But the thing about fear and anxiety or uncertainty, that's when our system is able to be really sharp and really locked in.
mm,
Let's think about that for a minute. And so it's possible for us to see things in Zen, they call it the beginner's mind. See things in
mm,
fresh and new ways. That's why I call it circular learning. If you read my book, I read my book over 50 times. Each time I read it, um, there's something else there. But when I was writing it, I wasn't there.
mm. You,
So I
you
look
got
at
out
it.
of your own way. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, so when you're in flow, you're not there because your self-consciousness goes and you're just in the moment. If you're focusing on how you're doing, you're not focused on what you're doing. So there's something about recording I'm looking at film, and I record things and I listen to my talk. And sometimes I write stuff down, and I have this habit. And if you go in my notes, when I get a quote or something, I always document it because it saves me time when I write a book and I don't have to go say, well, where'd that come from? I know exactly where it came from. And so sometimes I'll read something and say, man, that's pretty good. Where'd that come from? And it was me. But it didn't come from me. It came from that
from a higher
that wisdom, that wisdom and that creativity that comes out of it. That's why we love sports, and this people love to be creative. But flow is another word for being spontaneous, being of one's own will. And what allows us to be of one's own will, you ask me, how do people do this? You got to have a fully integrated self. So what does that mean? There's parts of us that we, Robert Bly talked about that long black bag we drag behind us. There's things that we repress because we don't want to see them. Instead of realizing you got to say yes to the fear wolf and the love wolf. You got to say yes to everything that's there. And then the question is, how are you going to relate to it? And there's a way of relating to it where it gets you where getting comfortable, being uncomfortable takes you to peace and ease and wisdom. Whereas there's a lot of us that have been, when I have my addiction and all the other stuff, I was comfortable being uncomfortable, but it was leading to more suffering, more fear, more alienation, more ill will or anger, hatred, and those sorts of things. And you can see it playing out in the world where people are looking at things, and depending on what box they put you in is going to determine whether they reach out and shake your hand or reach out and hit you.
Your life is a prayer to me, because it seems like you went from self-medication to, I'm not going to say self-meditation, because the idea of meditation is to get beyond the self, but you had a challenge in front of you and you're trying to cope with it, but you were just given a different framework for how to deal with it. And I just wonder how many lives would be on a different trajectory with different information. And that's what I love about your work, is you're reaching people on a global level and you're giving at least the opportunity of information. What they do with that, as we always talk about, is out of our control. But information is so powerful, and it seemed like that allowed you to change your life and so many others. It's a good information.
Yeah, so that I learned the 3 C's, but I also learned this idea of reframing things. So one of the things I had to reframe is pain as motivator.
Pain is a motivator. Yes.
See what I'm saying? So the pain is saying something, like I got migraine headaches. And what I learned from my migraine headaches was that I would get a migraine headache because I was type A, intense, and I was trying too hard. And I try so hard, I get a headache.
Wow.
Or I'm doing too many things. And then I realized the headache was telling me, you need to time out, dude. You need to calm down. But I had to get through my denial about it, because my denial was, listen, I grew up in the hood. I don't have stress. I don't get stressed, right? And
it's the next play mentality and tough it out.
Yeah, but then the body don't lie. The body does not lie. The body said, yo, George, I don't know about you, but there's stress in here because your shoulders are up around your ears. So maybe you should check this out. And I said, okay, well, let me check it out. Oh, okay. I go on a meditation retreat for 10 days and it takes 4 days before my shoulders come down. You see what I'm saying? And
you're able to speak to it.
To see it, and then you feel it, but you got to believe it. But denial is very thick. And when we deny and when we blame, you don't take personal responsibility. So yes, I got traumatized as things that happened to me growing up, being an African-American male in this society. It's stressful. Okay. Being Jewish is stressful right now. Being somebody who's not part of the tribe is stressful right now. You don't come from the right country, or you don't look the right way, or whatever. It could be stressful. But what we have to learn how to do is understand that something happens, then we interpret what it means. And that's where the freedom is you can interpret it as a stepping stone rather than a roadblock. You can interpret it as, you got to learn a lesson here. What's the lesson? So maybe when somebody's treating me, or when I'm driving and somebody wants to get into the lane, and I just say, look at them and just drive in front of them. Now, when I'm in the lane and I want to get in and somebody does that to me, now I have more compassion for that person. Say, well, maybe I'll let them in, because if somebody would have let me in when I needed to, that would have been great. Instead of just creating adversity, now I could just look at that person that wouldn't let me in as being nasty and being dangerous, and then I could throw them the bird, or I could just all of a sudden they're an enemy.
Right.
Instead of realizing, just like me, that person's just trying to get from point A to point B, and I can interpret it as like, don't take it personally, don't make assumptions,
Mm.
be impeccable with your word, it's for agreements, right?
I love it. Yeah.
And always do your best. Just don't worry about it, man. But we could see if we watch this, we could see if we can have an uncritical observation about reactions to life, then that's when we start to unveil the wizard behind the curtain. We start to see what's really running the show. But it takes courage, it takes faith, it takes this ability to be uncomfortable. Because what I'm really asking people to do when I work with them is to look at your stuff.
Mm.
And it's hard to look at. And it's hard to admit, man, I say I'm loving, but I was just like, ooh, I was so unkind. I was so vicious just then. Where's that coming from? So can I just see that and instead of backtrack and say, well, what beliefs were I operating from? Because your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values become your destiny. So if I'm hating on somebody, I got on the hate glasses.
Wow.
I'm not seeing the person as part of me. I'm seeing them as other. I'm making them a thing.
Mm.
You feel me? And that's how we can do, but we need to do that if we're going to kill somebody or we're going to fight a war. You got to make the other side inhuman. You got to demonize them in order to be able to do those vicious things to them.
You know, when I hear you speak, it was auspicious, but it wasn't by coincidence that we met on Passover. When you think of Passover, what do you think? You think of freedom from bondage, and enslavement that the Israelites experienced. And when I think of your work, I think of empowering people to experience freedom, that life in your mind doesn't have to be a prison sentence. Literally, you've worked with people within the prison systems to really find their freedom. And a big influence in your work was Viktor Frankl, the man who had every single freedom taken away from him, but he found his own. And it's my hope that viewers listening to our conversation, with everything going around, could start to explore what really freedom is and what it is to them and how do we get there. But I ask you, how do you define freedom in this life? Is that the absence of suffering and pain, the immunization of it? How would you personally define freedom in your practice?
Yes. So Chris Christopherson song, I think it was Bobby McGee, sung by Janet Joplin, was freedom is just another word for nothing else to lose.
Mm.
Freedom is saying yes to life. Viktor Frankl's foundation released a book after his death called Say Yes to Life. Freedom is being able to embrace, say yes to whatever comes up, generate the hope, and and focus on making things better. It's about for the highest good, the greatest good. So for me, Viktor Frankl talks about freedom as when you create space between stimulus and response, and in that space, you get the freedom and power to choose how you're going to be. So you can have somebody who is facing death, and they choose to say yes. They choose to just embrace it. Or you have somebody who has, like me, has an addiction. Freedom is being able to say, I have a problem. I need help. Freedom is autonomy. And William James, the father of psychology, at least in this country anyway, he said there was this controversy about is there free will or no such thing as free will. And he made it, and he wrote down, he says, from this moment on, I'm going to choose that free will exists and make a choice. And he said volitional effort is the effort of attention. So what is he saying? That's a fancy way of saying you have autonomy on how you direct your attention. But some of us don't because we've been programmed and we don't know that we have a choice. We
Mm,
don't know that we can say yes to something or say no to something, that we're always making a choice even when we don't think. So having autonomy and learning how to direct my attention to what's right, or to focus on the glass being half full rather than half empty, both are right. But one puts me in scarcity and survival mode, the other one puts me in growth mode, or this ability to say yes and investigate, what is this, how am I looking at this? How am I thinking? So that self-responsibility, realizing that I am responsible for how I choose to respond and react to something. And that's autonomy. You direct your attention, and then you want to learn how, when you focus on certain things, you feel better, you feel connection. Then maybe you ought to focus on those things instead of focusing on what divides us, or focus on what's wrong and what you don't have,
mm,
versus noticing that. And we know this from quantum physics, the observer and the observer are interacting. So when you're interacting with love, that's going to be a different experience than interacting with hate,
mm.
or with fear, or with anxiety, or with doubt, or not knowing. And so the don't know mind is a good mind because it's open to everything. They say a beginner can learn anything, an expert can't learn nothing, because it's always full.
Wow.
You, you,
Yes.
you see what I'm saying? So Bruce Lee did this. He was teaching James
Your,
Coburn and
your birthday twin, we have to preface.
huh?
Bruce Lee is your birthday twin. We have to preface
Yeah, yeah. As
that.
is Jimi Hendrix, but we won't get into that.
Yeah.
But but the thing is, he was teaching them. So he was at a table and he had a teacup and he took water and or tea, and he kept pouring it in,
Mm,
and it was running all over the place. And they said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "A full cup cannot receive anything. An empty cup can receive everything."
wow.
So you see what I'm saying? So if you know everything, you got the clutter and noise, there's no space to be. It's like, I can show you this piece of paper. You don't have to know what's on it, but there's no space to be. But
Mm,
in this is a blank space. So in that blank space, I'll get kind of philosophical here. There's nothing there, but because nothing is there, everything is there.
I know you read around maybe like a book a week or something. I don't know if you're
Yeah,
still
yeah,
able to
that's
do
right.
that.
Book a week for
My
over
question,
almost 40 years now.
and it's evident, especially when I read Unlocked, that wasn't a book that I could just breeze through. Every page I had to like stop myself because it was very like, it was beautiful, but it was intense, and every word was something thought provocative and challenged myself. It was some next level, you know what. But my my question for you is, would you say the more that you do know, the more that you recognize that you don't know?
Yes.
Wow.
It's so
Every that's
it's so
remarkable.
obvious, right?
Yeah.
It's so obvious that as much as I know, there's a lot more I don't know. But the thing is, I have this thirst and hunger for knowledge, and the real deal is just really. But what I really need to know more than knowledge, I need to know myself and know how I can be myself.
Mm,
How I can so I have to know myself so I can be myself, so I can express myself, so I can share myself.
mm. Love it, love it, love it. Now, my last question, George, before we get into your latest books, is right now we're heading into 2024. My number 24. I was born on the 24th, as was the Black Mamba number 24. Uh, my man. But and I know you had a very close relationship with Kobe, and it's evident in his outlook and his approach. You could definitely see your influence with him. But as we're coming into the year, certainly the world is going through a lot, as it has been the last couple of years. How could we, as you say, generate the hope past a lot of pain? And also, what is your personal prayer for what's happening right now? Have you set into your intentions, or keep attention to your intentions as we go into this new year? Because there's a lot happening, but also a lot of stuff is coming to the surface that's just old, barbaric, whatever you want to call it. And it's just for a lot of my clients, it's very deflating because we work so hard and then we have all this muck come up to the surface and we're like, this is not the Stone Age. It's like, what is going, like a lot of people are just like, I don't know what to make of this world anymore. So how do we find the hope when so many just feel hopeless with everything going on?
Focus on only the lovely and things of good report. This is what Never God had talked about, but it really comes down to what the Beatles wrote about in their song. All you need is love. It's about love, man. If you think about the teachings of Jesus Christ, now people get hung up on the person Jesus instead of focusing on the Christ consciousness.
Right. Well, the religious aspect versus
Yeah.
teaching.
So what was he really teaching?
Hmm.
Continual forgiveness and love everything and everybody. That's it. That's a challenge. And the thing about love is when you love something, you help it grow. And so you love what you labor for, and you labor for what you love. So love is all we need in the sense of you got to learn how to love yourself, those parts of yourself that are unlovable. It's like, and love is another word for open, embracing, saying yes to, because it's only by saying yes to something that you can relate to it in a way where you can acquire some wisdom, some understanding about it. And
To be
so,
open to other possibilities. Yeah.
other possibilities. So my job is, what I say is that you love everything, embrace everything, say yes to it, and then learn the lesson. But the lesson, what we're really learning is learning how to love ourselves and others. And sometimes that means forgiving ourselves and others. And sometimes that means tolerating or whatever. But and Viktor Frankl, not Viktor Frankl, but Eric Fromm wrote a book, The Art of Loving. And in that book, he talks about this idea of love, care, respond, there's a lot of things to accept, respect, to know someone, to respect them as they are, to respond to their needs, but the care and attention, when you care for something, you respond to someone. And sometimes we respond to people we don't even know. We just respond to them because that's the right thing to do, is to act as if that were me, how would I want them to treat me? The old golden rule, treat others as you want to be treated. Well, maybe that's what's happening. It's not so good. So you got to know how you want to be treated, because on some level, some of us feel like we don't deserve. I mean, I was working in prison and I was offering them the Viktor Frankl stuff, and this particular inmate felt like he didn't deserve it. That he had done bad things. So doing bad things is different than having your greatness, what you have inside. And when you do bad things, all you really have to do is ask for forgiveness. And one way to forgive is to stop doing it and then to turn around. You're like the guy that wrote Amazing Grace. He was a slave trader.
Wow.
And so you can turn. And of course, in the Hasidic tradition, that's the highest form of spirituality, is somebody like myself. I'm not saying it because I'm saying it, but I think
it's talking about it's teshuvah.
Yeah, we're talking about this idea that I've known, all of that, sensual desire and the addiction and everything, and because I know it and I still was able to turn from it. That's different than somebody who's never experienced it. And so they regard somebody like that as somebody who has turned is even higher than his other, because not because they know the knowledge and all that, but they had the direct experience of eating of the fruit and being able to say no to it, say, yeah, I turned away from it and focus on the opposite. And so there's something about, I think about it this way: no struggle, no swag. We go through things. It's the adversity that become, and our ability, like you said, what we need to do is have love, say yes to everything, generate the hope. But then when something happens, we can interpret it as a stepping stone, not as a roadblock. That's a choice. Now you see it as a roadblock, then that Now you're in the anxiety. Now you're into this victimization. I'm stuck. Nothing can change. And
Fight,
this is what
flight, or
elite
freeze.
athletes
Yeah.
do. Yeah, they
Mm,
see challenges. You see it as a challenge. You see it as opportunity for you to express your higher self. And this is what Hans Selye, the guy that wrote the book, The Stress of Life, he said, when we get confronted with these difficulties and these challenges, that they mobilize our latent abilities to express
mm,
themselves.
mm. And it seems a lot what you're saying is, to look at everything as an opportunity, to have growth mindset, that everything could be your teacher. Like I would think of Wayne Dyer,
Yes,
who's my biggest teacher, and he would just
yes.
give a simple example of, that old lady driving the Avalon, whatever, and there's always around that, and they're driving 2 miles an hour. You could look at that person and say, God, I want to get to my job. You're killing me. Or you could say, wow, this person's teaching me stillness. They're teaching me presence. They're coming
Mhm.
to me and telling me to slow down. And so when you are able to live a connected life, you recognize everything coming to you has a lesson to it. You just have to look out for it, be open to it, and get out of your own way and just be open to that letter from the universe. And it will speak to the depths of your being exactly not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear.
Mhm. Yes, I mean, and some of us, we have to go through that so many times before we really are able to say, "Wow,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a lesson." And it's okay if you don't get it now, if you're not ready for it. Just be willing to put it away. Like, okay, so this is not working, but I always have this option. I can always look at it this way. I can't tell you how many student athletes or people I worked with in the past, and some of the ones that have been the biggest resistors
Mm.
are now doing the work.
Mm.
And they say to me, "Well, George, I was immature. I didn't get it."
Maybe they weren't ready on the change
Well, that's
process.
exactly right. But that's why I see my work more like Johnny Appleseed. I just walk around and I'm just throwing the
Yeah.
seeds, and where they take root, they take root. But my job is to seed and keep it moving. Go to the
And
next field.
well, and empower the people to make their changes. We don't make the changes. We just give. It's like, we give out our hand to help them stand, but they're the one who has to walk, and that's kind
Yeah.
of it. So, George, my last question is: your book has been getting some rave reviews, Unlocked. Tell us a little bit about it, because I've read both of your books. I think they're both unique, brilliant, and I've taken a lot from both of them. But tell us a little bit about your latest book, Unlocked, and where could people, find the book? I would really recommend checking it out. It really gave me an
Yes.
incredible perspective on not only your life, but it also was an incredible teaching book. And it just was a tremendously different angle. And as you evolve, so does your teachings, I found throughout the trajectory
Yes.
of yourself. Yeah.
So let's talk about this a little bit. So I wrote a proposal, and the proposal I wrote about, I wanted to write a book about leadership.
Mm,
And so you go through the process. So we wrote the proposal and submitted it, and they accepted the proposal. But then they said, "Well, we want to go in a different direction.
mm,
We're wondering if you're willing to be as vulnerable as you want and talk about your journey."
mm,
And that's what happened. And so they said, "You can talk about the prison, you can talk about anything you want, but we want to give you the opportunity to talk about how you got to where you are, how I unlocked."
mm,
And so that's how it came about. And I just got more vulnerable and got deeper. I wanted to get into it. But it's interesting because I had written the Mindful Athlete 8 years before. It came out in 2015. But the interesting thing is, this book came out in May 2nd, 2023. But since the book came out and where I am now, because I've been doing all of these teachings and book events, I know way more about unlocking than I did when I read the book. I wrote the book, but that's it. If you want to learn something, you teach it.
mm,
I'm learning more and more because that's what I focus on. That's what I'm talking about, and people want to know about it. And I keep trying to think about how can I communicate this in a way that makes it accessible
mm,
and clear to other people, so they can say, "Okay, I could try that," or I'm interested
mm,
in that. So I try to share my experience. Well, I share my experience, strength, and hope. Yoda said, "Do it, do not. There's no try." Right. So I share my experience, strength, and hope, but really it's coming out of the silence, coming from that eye of the hurricane, that wisdom and that creativity is just coming out,
Mm,
and it just gives me opportunity to express myself more at a deeper level. But having people ask me questions helps me
mm.
to actually organize my thoughts and think about it. So I don't know if you're probably familiar with Alan Watts.
Oh,
Um,
sure. Yeah, he's getting a lot of traction now, especially. Everyone's hopped
yeah,
on the train.
the wisdom of insecurity is one of his books, right? And
Yeah.
then the other one is the book. But he said something that's profound, and I've experienced it. To ask the question is to know the answer.
To ask the question is to know the answer. This man's brilliant.
Yes, and so if you think about this pen,
Mm,
so I can't pick up one end of the pen without being
mm,
connected to the other end.
mm.
So
They're on the same.
they're
Yeah.
on the two sides of the coin.
Mm,
And I've seen it. Sometimes I'll ask somebody a question and then the answer will come. But normally we don't wait and we don't contemplate.
mm,
And when we wait and contemplate and you think about it, because the same place where the question came from, the answer's already there.
mm, mm. Wow, it's a beautiful realization to know, and it's the way that I see myself as a therapist and a client. Like I don't see myself as separate. Where it's like a seesaw. You know, the client helps me, I help them. It's
Yes.
they teach me, and Ram Dass would always reference that. It's like we have the title of it, but we're all one and the same, and all
Yeah.
interconnected. But you certainly are your biggest critic because I read your book and I just was like, man, this I had to stop myself because I was getting just so high and
A
off of
lot
every
of energy in
word.
that book. Yes.
It really was, and that's the way that I view life. You know, the wisdom Jacob's ladder, no pun intended. Where each book that I write, each day that I live, you're supposed to accelerate it. But a lot of people stop and they'll say, "All right, when I'm Rip Van Winkle with a gray beard down to the floor, then I'll start teaching." But you know, why not now? And if not you, then who? So I think it's important to seize the moment to recognize we can all teach. And as you say, the best way to learn is to teach. And I love that
Yes.
quote. We don't have
Yes.
to wait till we're,
Just think about it
at a
this way.
pinnacle.
People watch you more than they listen to you. So you're modeling something. And this is where we learn from. We learn from the models we have of the people we engage
Mhm.
with. So you just never know the impact you're going to have on
No.
someone. I've been around and doing this enough to know that people that I was doing this with, like, 22, 30 years ago, some of those students now they have kids,
Mm.
and sometimes it takes that long for them to understand what was said, what was being taught. My father said so much to me, and you probably hear this from others as well. As the older I get, the smarter my parents get,
Mm.
because they told me things that they just planted those seeds, or it's called non-declarative or implicit learning. But then at some point it manifests itself and say, oh yeah, 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 you told me that. And I believe that, because it's funny, because when people tell you something and you say, yeah, that resonates with me, all I'm doing is reminding you of what you already know, but just giving you permission to say
Yeah.
yes to it.
Every acorn has treeness, and that's a part of the unlocked where someone
Yes.
says something to you. You know, eventually timing is everything, and that's
And
ready
so
to be open.
you said something earlier I wanted to say something to. And here's the important thing. When you're in a relationship, one person can't change without the other one changing.
Mm.
So that's why I know, as a teacher or whatever, or if I'm doing something that's therapeutic, they're not only healing, it's healing me as well.
Symbiosis, like you're
Yes.
both. Yeah.
Yes. It's this, because, we know this from entrainment and all this other stuff, that
Mhm.
you get into rhythm and you get into flow with each other, just being around. And, you
Mhm.
know, things like yeah, it's just entrainment that happens, and we have attractive fields. This is what Dr. Hawkins talked about.
Mhm.
Dr. David Hawkins talked about attractive field. So when I think of my recovery, it's like, and they talk about improving conscious contact with God or higher power, however you call them. praying for only for knowledge of his will and the power to carry that out. And so at a certain level of vibration or consciousness level, using drugs and alcohol are not options, they're not choices. And so when you're at that low ebb, you know, that's still a choice to go out and do something, or to go out and, you know, smash somebody's car and get angry or whatever. But as you continue to raise consciousness, then you realize that, you have other choices available to you, because you're at a different level of consciousness or vibration. And that's the thing about it, is we want to continue to evolve our vibration. And that's why sometimes some people could say something and you don't get it, but somebody else says the same thing and you get it, because they're vibrating at a higher frequency.
There's almost congruency with who they are, their words, and what they're saying. And, you know, it's like you could listen to one person present, the other person could have the stenography of that person, and who are they going to listen to? The ones that are congruent in living those words and matching the vibration.
Right.
The incongruent.
Yeah, so I think I can talk about that stuff here, and it's okay, because I can't talk about that kind of stuff everywhere, because some people won't get it.
No,
I know you get it, and I know that's, you know, that your audience probably gets it as well. So
we're an open ocean here. Everything's acceptable and understood. We're not closed. We're open. So, my man George, if I wanted to get in touch with you, or to attend maybe one of your online trainings or workshops, or what's like the best way, you know, to find you? You have a website, you know?
George at George, it's georgemumford.com is the website. Yes, but if you Google me, you'll get all kinds of stuff. I have a YouTube channel. You can buy the book at Amazon, or buy
books, plural,
or any of that stuff. Books, yeah, you're right. Books. I keep forgetting. I got 2 books. And excuse me, but even if you go to the website, you know, there's things you can access. I have an online course I do twice a year, but we have you know, community groups, that people that do the course of creating a community we have groups on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But the main thing is just go to the website, and we'll have different offerings. You know, we're doing stuff with youth now, and we just created we actually have part of the process of the 6-week course that we started giving people text messages to remind them of the practice, and we just created a 30-day challenge where people can sign up for text messages, that 2 a day or something like that. And then we have an app actually that we're developing as well. So it's a lot of stuff we did this year. We were just talking about the year in review. No wonder I'm tired. We did a lot. You know, but yeah. So it's like, yeah. So you could, you know, it's funny. You could go to the website and you can get, you know, you'll get to direction there. But if you go to Amazon, you know, my book is on Amazon, my books, I should say, and different formats. The audible portion of my book is my voice. And my athlete, I had somebody do it. And this book, I fought to be able to do it. And initially they didn't want me to do it. They wanted somebody else to do it, but we fought and we were able to be able to do it. And it was one of the most challenging things that I had to do, because I when I give presentations, sometimes I don't have notes. I just let the spirit move me. You know, I think I read somewhere, Edgar Casey said that somebody asked Jesus when they go before councils, how should they approach it? And he said something to the effect that I just have, you know, you just have some bullet points, and then you let the spirit move you.
And, you know, it's when I listen to Michael or Kobe talk, they're different, but you could tell in their voice, there's something there. They're connected. And I feel the same way with you. You have a beautiful voice. I mean, bear in mind, I'm biased, and I've also heard you sing a cover of Purple Haze, which was beautiful as well, too. So you're a great singer, but also, you know, you got the voice, and that's all vibration. Yeah, really, you're very connected man. And I'm glad you were able, you know, to do this, because your voice is healing, it's mindful, it's spiritual, and, you know, it's connected to all the right things.
Yeah. But you don't know the power of the dark side. You know, you can be Darth Vader. Yes. So we have that, but you're right. It's how I use the voice, and I do it in jest, but it's just the spirit moving through me, man. I'm just so grateful to have this opportunity to share, but at the same time, it's like I'm having fun being George,
That's
just
it.
allowing myself to that the ever changing event to keep evolving and changing and yeah, I just love people. I love being able to share
Mm.
this, and but my intention is to help everybody unlock, no matter where you are, no matter what time it is or whatever. That we need everybody to unlock. We need everybody to be who they are.
The better
And
everyone else is, the better we all are.
there you
And
go.
there's a
Yeah,
lot of congruency with one of your biggest teachings is if you don't know who you are, you could be anybody. If you don't know where you're going, you could be anywhere.
that's right.
So you have that sense of self and you have that direction. Certainly, we know the ending, we know is eternal, but around the corner, we're trying to develop curiosity, exploration, mindfulness with whatever comes our way in presence. So, George, it was a pleasure having you on my channel. You're a welcome guest. At home with George on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder anytime. And I look up to you in many ways. You're someone who I feel divinely connected by. And there's a lot of strings that put this together, but I consider you a brilliant luminary who has literally changed the world and had a tremendous impact on my personal life in such a profound way. And I know so many could share the same sentiments. So the world is such a better place with you here. It
Yeah.
really is.
Well, I have to say, Jake, I saw you the first time I met you.
Yeah. Remember that I was just a
Yeah,
young kid.
I see it. That's one of my gifts. I see greatness in everybody. When I see people, I see their masterpiece.
Wow. And you know what? That's true. Because and my brother's a great kid, but we were the ones who were chatting. And, I remember being by the front door and you were giving me a tutorial, about sports. And sometimes when people talk to you, they're just not, they're talking not
At
to
you.
you, but at you.
Yeah.
And there was an eternal moment where we just locked or unlocked. And I said, this guy's tuning in, and I just kind of felt uplifted or transported. I just knew there was something to that moment. It was special. There was so many things about that day that we could go all day about. Bear in mind, I saw your partner's sister at a play a couple weeks ago, and I recognized her, and it was just in the middle of nowhere. It was just there was so many cosmic themes on that day that I know it was shared. It was meant to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, thank you, GM. You're welcome anytime, George, and keep up the great work. And I thank you for your generous time and for being you.
Okay, Jake. Appreciate
Thank
you,
you.
man. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. That was an incredible interview with George Mumford. I feel high as a kite right now by hearing every word that he just said. It was so uplifting and high as a kite in a good way. But but George really was able to really elevate my spirit just from listening to it. And I'm sure from you listening to George's interview, there is no question that I'm sure you got a lot out of our conversation. So thank you for tuning into our incredible dialogue with George Mumford. Make sure you continually be a part of the community by subscribing and sharing our video. We wish all of our viewers a wonderful 2024. And, this was the perfect interview to really end the new year as we can generate the hope past the pain, live in mindfulness, compassion, empathy, and the vibration of love. And that's where we all need to be with everything going on. So thank you for all tuning in here to my conversation with George. This is memorable, and we'll see you in the new year coming up. Thank you.